Here we are. I decided that it would be a very good idea for me to continue on with tier lists. The problem is, I didn't pre-record this by that much, and I got sick, and it's I think it's pretty obvious in my voice. But I'm pretty miserable. But I promised myself that I would keep up on this schedule that I've had, even though it's not important, but trying to keep consistency. And I decided that I needed to pick something if I was going to be miserable that I could kind of talk through and kind of just easily go through. And we're going to talk about Dark Souls bosses, how I think they're designed, and how the player can respond. Now, I will be doing a kind of boss rankings for difficulty at different like time with actual gameplay, like a proper video. But this one is much more of like more opinionated than that, whereas this is just like how I think the design is versus, you know, the difficulty. Which I oh, there's the Bed of Chaos. I was like, I thought I I was looking, I didn't see Bed of Chaos, but I think that's all the bosses. Um, it's some random amount I'm not gonna count. And also I don't have that much time before I run out of water, so this is gonna probably be one of the shorter one of these. Taking a drink, and let's get into. I guess we'll just go in order of how it is, or no? Let's go in order of boss encounters. Let's go Asylum Demon. Asylum Demon. I think the first time you fight it is empty. Like straight up, it's just an empty fight. It's teaching you. It's not anything bad. It's just there you go. Uh, I will say if we're talking the original remat or the original game, it would definitely go with not fair. If you guys remember the original game for Dark Souls 1, uh, this fight was annoying on the refight. The hitboxes were wonky. A lot of the hitboxes shifted really weirdly into the wall. It was a really janky fight, but remaster is just kind of empty. It's pretty basic. There's like, I mean, I don't know if, oh, here's the fire stage, but there's like a couple refights that I think are more interesting, but it's just empty. It doesn't really fulfill anything. It's cool to like go back and kind of like trash that thing after barely escaping with your life if it's the first time you're playing, but afterwards it becomes a footnote. It's just okay, let's get done. Um, Tauros Demon is next. Uh, I guess it's just empty too. I guess it's like not fair in the boss encounter, but he's so like pathetically easy that it's not fair for both. Because yeah, I'm gonna put not fair, and not in the way I thought I would be putting stuff in this tier, but it's not fair for either. It's very like cheap boss fight most of the time. Um, because of the limited space, Tauros Demon has the inherent advantage and bleeds your stamina pretty readily. But also because of the tight corridors, because of the ladder setup, you're able to get free damage, and also at the same time on that little like bridge or part of the wall, it's broken up, so Tauros Demon could just fall off, which happens a lot on accident when I'm playing. Um, I don't like even when you try not to. Sometimes he'll just jump back and slide off because of the way the collision is. Not fair for anybody involved. It would probably be an empty if I didn't count both sides of that. Uh, is technically Capra Demon next? I mean, technically Bell Gargoyle is, but you could go either way. And this also ignoring that you could, go in an alternate route anyway. We'll go Capra Demon because I feel like this is the example of not fair. This guy is so bad. Like, unlike the Tauros Demon who becomes a regular Mook later, Capra Demon becomes a regular Mook that is super easy. Like, Tauros Demon, at least when you encounter them, it's like, okay, I have to participate. Capra Demon is so pathetic without his dogs, it's not even close. This is all about making the the thing not fair. Uh, the difficulty of a lot of early boss encounters is making stuff not fair. Um, and honestly, like I think this is the worst scenario. Like this is definitely the most not fair in the game because not only do the dogs do an insane amount of bleed, uh, you're not gonna have a high enough stamina if you're going in the proper order or what is kind of laid out for you. I guess instead of saying proper order. Um, you're gonna get bodied pretty hard. The first time I'll admit the first time I played Dark Souls 1, I had a few stopping points. One was trying to find where to go, of course, and then the second was the Capra Demon. Capra Demon is, I think, one of the most unfair parts of the game. I also kind of put in not fun, which is, they're kind of like both negatives of the same way. Like, technically, not fun is not lower than not fair. It's just not fun. Like, with not fair, you can have fun with this. It's really fun to like make a build and just trash Capra Demon. So that's why it's a not fair. Uh, I think oh, Stray Demon is actually the proper asylum, so we'll do that. Nowadays, I'd probably play in fair play. Uh, this is technically the asylum demon you run into. I think these are actually supposed to be swapped, but whatever. This is the second visit one. That's the one I'm putting. Um, I don't remember which one's proper, but I think it's fair play in the remaster. If we're talking old, it's definitely not fair sometimes, but hey. All right, next we go the Gargoyles. I think this is actually a really good fight. I love the Gargoyle fight in Dark Souls 1. I love it. I don't think Gargoyles are ever bad. Even when they get really swarmy in one of the later entries, I still think it's like a fun fight. It's not like fair, but it's fun. I think Bell Gargoyles are incredibly a good fight. It's why I consider it to be one of the best fights in the game. I'd almost argue here, but there's a few others I think are worth more. Where are we going? We finished that, so we go down to technically Gaping Dragon. Man, Moonlight Butterfly. This is just not fun. This is one of the most boring boss fights in the game. Like, really, it's the reason this tier is actually here. Like, some are not fair, and that's fine. This is just boring. It's not hard. It's really not. I guess Sanctuary Guardian could technically be not fun sometimes. Excuse me. Um, Moving on. What are we doing? Moonlight into Gaping Dragon. I'm gonna cough again. I think this is the reason to play Dark Souls. I think this is one of my favorite fights in the game. It's very underrated because it's this like grand scale event. It's the first like, oh god, look how massive this thing is. Look how just like, how am I supposed to fight this? It feels very, very like, David versus Goliath, and I think Gaping Dragon is one of my favorites. It's probably the lower end of this. I happen to prefer Bell Gargoyles for a lot of reasons, but I think overall Gaping Dragon does better. Um, Damn, my voice is already going, so we have to speed it up, or I have to talk faster, which not gonna happen. We're just gonna. Where am I going? I'm going to Blighttown. Is that where I'm at? I forget the stuff I normally do. We have Quelaag, I think is the next one. I think Quelaag is actually a good fight. I think it has a lot of like learning reaches, which is kind of weird to say because like once you figure out the roles of this game, of Dark Souls 1 specifically, it's a pretty easy game. Same with Dark Souls 2 and 3 and Elden Ring. Once you figure out what you're actually able to do with your dodges, it's a pretty easy game. And I think Chaos Witch Quelaag is like the first teaching stone. Because there's some delays on her swings. She has some limiting space maneuvers, which I prefer that over forced limiting spaces. But overall, I think it's definitely not better than Bell Gargoyles, but it's definitely a good fight. Technically, you could move on to a lot of stuff here. I guess we'll go handle the Iron Golem now. I think the Iron Golem fight is actually really empty. It's a lot like Taurus Demon, where it's supposed to be like limiting space, but I think it's even more boring because sadly he could fall off pretty easily, and yeah, you could fall off. I just swapped those whoops, but I just think it's really empty. It's not hard. It's which is really weird because I think this is the like stopping point for a lot of people. My stopping point was Capra Demon, and I managed to play through into another boss, which we'll get to. But when you go to Sen's Fortress for the first time, I think a lot of people struggle with it. I didn't happen to, but from what I hear from other people a lot of the time, and when I've helped them out, Sen's Fortress is always the struggle point, and Iron Golem is kind of like not worth the the time, if that makes sense. I guess that's the best way I could describe it. Uh, where are we going? We're in Orlando. Technically, we could do crossbreed Priscilla at this point. Technically, we're gonna be doing the DLC before Gwen. Um, I think crossbreed Priscilla is actually really interesting. It's fair play, even though it's not really. I think it's almost a good fight. I just think it's just fair play. It's not like fair as in like it's fair play as in okay, it makes sense. I hit you and you now have this stealth thing. It's interesting. It's pretty easy, uh, but I do like the fight. Uh, Besides the glitch at the end, I guess that would be not fair, but hey, that's the way it be. So we do that. We go and we have Ornstein Smock. This was the stopping point for me. For this is the what I consider the third stopping point I had in my original playthrough was Ornstein Smock. I think this fight is really really good. Even as somebody who struggled a lot to play it, as somebody who probably died 50 times the first time I played, like I tried to beat Ornstein Smock, I still think is one of the standout fights in the series. The presentation, the battle arena, everything is, hey, you messed up, get bodied. There's some like janky hammer stuff, but I mean, we've run into so much hammer nonsense, like big weapons causing issues that like whatever happens with it is fine. And even such thing as like Ornstein's dashes are like pretty like telegraphed. It's just you learning to focus on multiple facets that I think really makes this a good fight. I would argue that it could be the reason to play Dark Souls because this is one of the most recognizable fights, but I don't think it's that good. I think it's really the shock value of getting bodied and eventually winning the first time that carries this fight a lot. Because afterwards it becomes really really easy. Uh, Technically, Pinwheel would be next. It depends what order we go. Pinwheel is technically earlier if we want to argue. There's a lot of stuff you can argue, but now that we can fast travel, it doesn't really matter. I think we're just gonna say Pinwheel. It's just I think it's not fair for Pinwheel. I I realize not fair is just Capra Demon, and then the others is it's not fair for the bosses. So yeah, there we go. Pinwheel's not fair. Um, it's just pathetically easy. Even at the beginning of the game, it's pathetically easy. I feel like they should have made this arena huge, like they did with Gwendolyn, and just had like that type of styling for the boss, but they went with a pretty close, tight arena. Technically, you could do Gwendolyn at this point, kind of. We'll save it for later. I'm gonna say right now, Gwendolyn's gonna be a not fun, but let's do fire. Let's do all the fire stuff. Ceaseless Discharge, I think, is just empty. It's kind of boring. It's the same fight. I think it's actually almost. It's probably one of my least favorite fights, but it's not like not fun. It's it's fun in some ways, but in others, it's really frustrating. This goes into. I know I'm skipping Demon Fire Stage for a second, but Centipede Demon, I think, is fine once you get past the camera. I don't think anything is too egregious. I think it's actually a pretty showboaty like fight, which I think is really cool. Um, I almost want to say it's actually more empty, but it's fair play if you get past the camera. But the Centipede Demon doesn't have a lot of stuff to actually hit you with. Weirdly enough, it's like kind of one of those things where like yeah you can't see it, but it can't really hit you that properly. Demon Fire Stage I think is like the final evolution of Stray Demon, and I actually think it's a good fight in a way. But I will just say it's in fair play. I think it's better than Stray Demon because at least the fire effects actually like follow the hitbox. But yeah, uh, we're just gonna put this in not fun. I don't think it's fun. We have these are all the DLC. We have let's get I think Sif is one of my favorite fights in the series. Even though it's actually the easiest by a long shot, it's simple. I just think there's a lot of legacy to this fight that I can't help but think of it first when I think of Dark Souls 1, besides some of these. But I think it's a really good fight. Which goes into, I guess, Four Kings because they're attached. I think this is a good fight, but it's really just a damage check, which can get really frustrating. Um, so part of it makes it feel really empty, and other parts makes me want to say it's a good fight. But I'm just gonna give it the best empty category, because it's technically just a bunch of health bars. It's also one of my favorite things to do is actually uh, challenge all four at the same time sometimes. Well, challenge all three. It's super slow if you want to do it that way, but like it's actually really really slow, which I think is a big problem. I really wish it became much more of like a swarm mechanic than it is just like, oh, health bar or oh, certain time. I wish there was a little more going on. Uh, let's see, what are we doing? I think the Bed of Chaos is not fun. The first time you play it, it's just platforming for the sake of platforming. It's like a puzzle more than anything. I think this is probably the order. Yeah, technically. The only thing that like saves this from being not the worst is that when you play it again, you know exactly what to do, and you can just quick. You can finish this in like 2 minutes, at most. Like it's super quick. Uh, Nito, I think, is actually a pretty good boss fight. Besides the fact you enter a little low health, and he has a few skeletons, which I think makes me feel not fair. I do like the fight though. I will say this is probably the most not fair, but it's also kind of empty. There's a lot here. I think it's not fair, but still think Capra Demon is the most bullshit. Uh, and then Seat the Scaleless, literal definition of not fair. I think this is a pretty empty boss fight. I think this is actually one of my least favorite bosses in Dark Souls 1. Because like there was so much like potential, I guess would be the word, to make it like insanely good. Um, and then we'll leave that for later. We have the Sanctuary Guardian, which I think it's kind of empty fair play. It's also not fair, kind of. Also not fun. It's a little bit of everything. I'm just gonna play at the bottom of fair play because some its hitbox is a little wonky. It has hitboxes that are wonky. I think that's fair play. Uh, we have Calamite, which I think is one of the best fights in Souls. It's above Bell Gargoyles for sure. I happen to think this fight is really really fun. It's the first like dragon that feels really really cool. Uh, and then we have Artorias. Technically, we're going in a weird order. I think Artorias is my personal favorite fight. It feels very, very cinematic. Um, yeah, it's really, really fun. And then we have Father of the Abyss. I think it's a good fight. I do think it's probably here. No, I actually think it might be right here. I think there's some jank in it. I think if you don't know any better, it's definitely brutal. And it really sucks that it happens to be the final boss because I feel like Artorias feels so cinematic and just like pulse pounding, which goes into Gwyn, which I think is actually a really good way to end the game, and sets you up for like wanting to play New Game Plus because you can get bodied by Gwyn and then just immediately run back, keep trying, keep trying, keep trying, and then you get that one fight where you just finally win, and it's just so good. I happen to think that both of these guys are. You could argue for both these for top one in the game, and I could definitely see it. Gaping Dragon is more of a personal choice, but I happen to really like it, and I also like Sif. The only thing that really sucks about Gaping Dragon is that I hate its area. The depth sucks a lot. And then I think good fight. These are all good fights. I'm willing to say that I enjoy fair play quite a bit. Uh, some of these are a little weird. I feel like Four Kings kind of needs to move up. Yeah, I'm gonna move it up. Uh, Empty, I think it's like okay, it's here. cool, let's get it done, part of the main game. Not fair. I actually don't enjoy any of these. Like, even Nito. Like, Nito, I think, is a cool boss design, besides, like, other factors around it. And then, I think Not Fun are the worst bosses in the game. Just hands down. Which, hey, there we go. Sorry for the kind of meh voice. I can't really help it. Hopefully it's better for some recordings I need to get done for the weekend and later, because I have to build up a little bit of space. But hopefully I do have some space, but we'll see what happens. Overall, I think this is pretty good. I think there's a few that I think a lot of people would be like, eh. But I do plan on releasing that video for Dark Souls, like, boss rankings on difficulty at some point in the future. So be on the lookout for that.